We're back with part 2 of our spotlight of Studio Series 86 Megatron, this time taking a deep dive into Megatron's tank alt mode, doing a step-by-step transformation, and showcasing some fun and unique ways to display him, plus a bonus comparison you won't want to miss. All this and more, only at Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. Megatron is rolling in with some heavy firepower, and he's not backing down until he's laid waste to every Autobot in his path. While part 1 of our spotlight on Studio Series 86 Megatron covered the menacing bot himself with some truly inspired tips, tricks, and displays, this week's focus is all about Megatron's tank mode. And while he may not transform into the iconic Walther P-38 any longer, we still get an alt mode that truly packs a punch. We're taking an in-depth look into every angle of the tank, team builds, wicked display ideas, and some surprising comparisons to other Decepticon tanks in past Megatron releases. I'll show you exactly how to transform him step by step from bot to tank, and we'll see just how well this alt mode stands up against the legends that came before him. Plus, we take a look back at a few very special versions of Megatron. If you thought part 1 was loaded, you won't want to miss this week's action-packed part 2. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. We all knew we weren't going to be getting Megatron in his Walther P-38 alt mode, and that's unfortunate. But in the end, I do ultimately think we got the next best thing. The Megatron we all know and love from the 86 movie, that in this case transforms into a pretty cool and fairly well designed tank mode. And as such, it lets us old school collectors and fans have Megatron in bot mode that looks incredible, but also allows for the next generation to get a version of Megatron that both transforms into something they can play with, and allows them to experience an iconic version of him designed for a modern world. While he may not be perfect in this mode, he comes pretty darn close, and to be honest, I really like the design. It's fun, fairly realistic, and looks really good within the 86 lineup. So let's put all the chaos aside and see what this version of Megatron in his alt mode is all about and how he can fit into your collection. Overall, I think the Studio Series 86 Megatron in his tank mode looks quite good. It's obviously a blend of both a real-world tank design and some more creative elements bled in from his look from the 86 movie, and I'm okay with that. And depending on which angle you look from, he actually looks quite realistic for an Earth-based mode, and that cannon looks incredible. I even like the bit of color variation on the back, which breaks up the gray monotony. I think the bottom half looks better than the top half, strictly from a realism perspective. I also really appreciate the nice design on the tank treads, though I'm still holding out for working treads one day. The turret is a part which I wish could have looked a bit more like an actual tank's turret, though I understand why they went this route. I think it would have taken a ton of engineering to cover that all up, which would have been beyond the scope of this specific Transformers line. Again, the lower portion of the tank mode is spot on, sleek, and realistic. Though I think given today's variety of real-world tanks, there's room for some flexibility on the turret section. Kinda has a futuristic look here. The back is where it loses me a bit, not the cleanest, but again, if I give the design a bit of slack, I could almost imagine it being some type of modern upgrade with some purpose. The turret does rotate 360 degrees, which is a must, especially for a Studio Series level Megatron. Though it does so from a rear-mounted pivot point instead of a center turret like you'd see on a real tank. As a result, it looks a bit off-center the more you rotate it out. Not a deal breaker though. As we saw in part 1, Megatron does come with a small version of him as a laser, which is great for displays and also fun to incorporate into his tank mode as another option. I personally won't keep him this way, but it's something you can do. As for his energy sword, it can fit onto his side as well as some other places, but I personally would never keep a sword like this. Check out part 1 of this spotlight though for some great ways to display him with his sword plus his iconic mace, which I borrowed from another version of Megatron and which perfectly fits. Happy to say that his fusion cannon fits all the different blast effects from the various Transformers lines from the last several years, which means you have tons of options from which to choose. My favorite right now being this blue blast effect, which I like because of its design and the darker tones which I feel fit Megatron's tank mode best. In the end, I have lightened up a bit and accept this as a fine alternative for Megatron, even an 86 movie Megatron, and I'll always have my Masterpiece Megatron for a more true to form version. Let's get into some comparisons now to see how he scales with a bunch of Autobots and Decepticons. And we'll start with Overcharge here, who I absolutely love. I don't know why, but I'm totally fine with this split swing design in these colors and for this character. And putting these two together just works. I think they scale really well, have the same overall feel and look, and make for one incredible Decepticon tank unit. I do wish they could have found a way to make SS-86 Megatron's turret look more like overcharges though. However, in this case of that design, the turret doesn't in fact transform very much, so it's much easier to have it designed this way. This is probably the most sought after comparison I'd say, because in the end, you want Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime and Megatron to look good next to each other. And minus some slight scale discrepancies, overall they look fantastic next to each other. Megatron can definitely hold his own next to Optimus. I'm actually quite surprised at how big Megatron does in fact look next to Optimus, which is great. You want a tank version of Megatron to be scaled this way as compared to a semi. Generally, they're about the same size and length, with Megatron perhaps being slightly bigger in width, but not by much. The front view also scales well I'd say, both having nice imposing designs to them. I have to say though that SS-86 Optimus wins on the back, with his whole design being a lot cleaner. I wonder if some extra bit of paneling on Megatron could have smoothed things out a bit. I absolutely love this Megatron next to Optimus with his trailer. They just look really good like this, though Megatron does end up feeling a bit smaller now. But not by too much, because in the end, Megatron is quite the big bot in both bot and alt mode. So in the end, I think he holds up quite well against Optimus, with or without the trailer. I'll showcase some fun displays in the displays and build section coming up. Now let's go through a few major comparisons, starting with Galvatron in his original toy colors. I like these guys next to each other, especially in these colors. You kind of see the evolution here a bit better, and even makes for a great mini display. I never did end up getting Earthrise Megatron. I just didn't like the look, even if the tank mode did look fairly realistic as well. Just seemed a bit small. So this version of Megatron will have to do. The great thing is, you can still use this version as Megatron before he gets his Earth mode. And of course, Overcharge, who in my opinion still looks the best next to Megatron. As does Blitzwing. I think I've gotten used to this version of Blitzwing at this point, and I like how he scales with Studio Series. Another great comparison, Megatron and his namesake and inspiration, Megatronus from the Age of the Primes line. One of my favorite pairings for sure. And we couldn't leave out Tarn, the devoted to a fault follower of Megatron, though I do wish he was bigger now. Wonder if they'll ever upscale him. Had to throw in Warpath here, who I think probably has the best tank design from a realism perspective. Might be a bit smaller, but still looks great here. As for vehicles, I have the same opinion as I did with him up against Optimus. I think they scale really nicely, at least for this group of Autobot designs. Since we're on a military kick here and we don't yet have Brawl, we'll have to use Vortex as the next best thing. Totally off scale, but I like how they look next to each other in these colors and as military vehicles. And finally, the Elite Seeker from the recent Devastation release to get an idea how he scales with the Seekers. I'm saving a true comparison for when we get in Studio Series 86 Thundercracker. Something I noticed, which I don't think is based off of anything, but I think is great for creating some of my own lore, is the circular design features on both Megatron and Galvatron, which I'd imagine was a holdover that ties these bots together. Same for Megatronus, which has that small weapon system on the left side of his turret, which we could say Megatron appropriated into his own design. While we're here, let's take a deeper look at Megatronus versus Megatron, and like I said earlier, these really do look fantastic next to each other. Definitely a display idea if ever there were one. Megatronus is longer in tank mode, though as we saw in part 1, is basically the same height in bot mode, funny enough. Likely due to the fact that they had less to play with design-wise for Megatron in order to fit him into an Earth-based tank mode. Megatronus is a bit sleeker overall, even from the back, which again I'd say is cleaner and my preference. As for Siege Era Megatron, interesting to see that his tank mode is slightly bigger as well. Though I do see the evolutionary ties here going from Cybertronian to Earth-based mode. Do you guys have a preference? Old or new Megatron? Let me know in the comments section. Finally, a nice comparison of some of these various Transformers Earth-based tank modes, which can totally double as a display idea. I do like having a bunch of high quality tanks now for our collection. As we start wrapping up this section, let's take a quick look at a comparison years in the making. Studio Series 86 Megatron versus Combiner Wars Megatron, which to me is still a gold standard in tank design. Not only that, but this is what started getting me back into collecting mainline Transformers again, and so I have a special place in my heart for this figure. The detail on this is exquisite and completely looks like a modern stealthy tank, which could actually exist, with working treads, a perfect turret, and a beautiful silver finish. And it was big, look at its size. You can see the bot comparison in part 1, which for sure had some faults, but this tank design was pretty much perfect. Before we leave this section, a surprise bonus, my first Masterpiece Megatron MP5, which I brought back all the way from my home where I grew up, just for this review, which I didn't have with me for part 1. And wow how things have evolved, we're now getting general release figures that are essentially mini masterpieces that look better than the originals. But I still love this guy, he really was the first to take the original 84 toy and update it for collectors in a premium format. Yes, he may have had some wonky elements to him, but he was a great first attempt at revitalizing the 80s toy for an adult fan base. But the real reason I'm including him here is because I actually transformed him for the first time just for this review, so we could have one final Megatron comparison. Megatron the tank versus Megatron the laser. And while I do have the more modern Masterpiece Megatron as well, I wanted to show this one in its beautiful shiny finish, which I will now proudly display in our collection here. See, you can have your cake and eat it too. Alright, let's transform this guy. And before we start, I have to say this is actually a really fun one to transform. Alright, so first let's take off that fusion cannon. And then we just have to take off this little laser part as well. Now we'll open up the arms. So each side panel opens like this, and then you rotate it around 180 degrees. And once the fist is pushed in, you just close it back up and turn it in 90 degrees. Same thing here. Open up the side panels. Flip in the fist, rotate it 180 degrees, close it shut, and then just rotate the lower arm in 90 degrees. Now this part you just have to pull out, kind of do it by wiggling it in and then pulling out. And now what I like to do is lift up the arms like this at this point. And then we'll open up the back panel and then flip out this section. And I turn the turret part here 180 degrees at this point. Now let's take the chest. We'll pull it open. And then just lower this part down. You want to do this right at this spot. And then flip the head in. Lift the front portion of the tank back up. It clicks right in. Nice and smooth. And then we'll rotate the waist to 180 degrees. You see that part's still open. And now we're going to take these side flaps, lift them up, and bring them around like so. You see these tabs here, they fit into each other. So what you'll do now is just lift up the leg 90 degrees. And it should tap in right away. We'll do the other side as well. I'll just lift up the leg 90 degrees and tab it in. This sometimes gets loose throughout the transformation, so you just got to push it back in. All right, now let's work on the front part. We're going to just push this whole section back in until it clicks, and you should get a straight, basically a straight 180 kind of looking feel to it. All right, there it is. Nice and straight. Okay, now we're going to move to the turret part. We're going to lift this up. You're going to wiggle it up so you get a 90-degree angle with these kind of 3 pivot points. We'll do the same on the other side. It takes a little bit of work sometimes, but that's the configuration you want, and then they tab into each other. You can see it's a little off, but once you play around with it, it will close in. Any second now. There you go. That's pretty much the way it's supposed to look. All right, now we'll move on to the legs. And so you got to lift this flap up on each side. And this part's actually kind of fun. So you untab this back part, which forms the middle part of the tread. And then, yeah, you see that part keeps coming out, but it will all tab in perfectly once everything's set up. So then just open up each leg to basically form the tread. And here's the other one. And then what you have to do is open up each of these sections, so the front and the back, and there's a little piece that opens up once you do that. So here's one, you just pull it out like that, close it back up, and then you do the same for the back. There's another piece, and then close that back up. And then all you have to do is lift up this middle section. You just gotta push it up like that, it tabs in, and there you go. That's one side of the tank. And now we'll do the same thing on the other side. So open it up, pull this out, and then close it. And then we'll do the same for the other part of it and close that. And then for the middle, we just do the exact same thing. Lift it up, it clicks in pretty tightly actually. And now we have both sides ready. So now all we have to do is tab each of the treads into place. You can see right here there's a major one, but there's also some minor tabs that click throughout this section so that it tabs in properly and it doesn't move. Once you get that main one, they pretty much line up perfectly. And then you just have to squeeze. What I do is anyways, I squeeze the two together. See right here, I'll just show you quickly. Right there's another tab. So once it's lined up, everything should squeeze together perfectly. It's right there. And you can see how smooth and tight everything looks. So now we just got to do the back. So you see this part here, you got to fold this back in, and you don't want to go too deep. You kind of want to line it up. See this one, I went a little too far in. So let's try the other one. And I'll just fix this one. It's supposed to pretty much be flush with the turret section. Just like that. And now we'll just do the last part, which is folding up the back. So you push up the back of the foot, turn the whole thing in. There's a tab like right here. It's not the strongest of tabs, but it generally stays in place. So we'll do the same thing on this side. Just fold that part in. It's actually not the back, it's the front part of the foot. And it should all fit nice and snug. That's pretty much the body. Now all we have to do is grab the fusion cannon and we undo this. It's kind of an ingenious way. I haven't seen this done recently, or I mean at all really. You just open that up, and then before we put it on the tank, we'll take this part, just push it in, and then you can see it fits right in that part that I was kind of struggling with a bit, but now you see why it has to be perfect. And then there's another couple of tabs right in the front on each side, and as soon as they're lined up, they'll tab in like this any second now. There you go. And there you go, Megatron transformed into his tank mode. Now I know 99% of you will not be displaying him in his tank mode, and we likely won't in most cases either. But that doesn't mean we can't have a bit of fun and create some cool team builds and display ideas. Starting with the most obvious of them all, Optimus Prime versus Megatron. And in the end, as far as alt modes go, this is the best pairing of these two. And if you want to take it a step further, adding in some more tanks is always an awesome idea. Especially now that we pretty much have a full column of them. With these three looking the best together in my opinion. If Megatron is going to be rolling through the battlefield, he'll not only need some Seekers for air support, but some major heavy hitters on the ground as well. And I can't think of a better crew than these guys ripping through the battlefield, decimating everything in their way. So you may be asking, why throw in the Devastation ground soldier here? Seems a bit out of place. Well, actually, it's because Studio Series 86 Megatron has a close enough design to the Devastation model that I think this team up for a display could work nicely as well. You can even throw an Overcharge here as well as a stand-in for the tank ground soldier, and now you have a personal guard unit for Megatron. For a bit more action, you gotta have Megatron crushing an Autobot beneath his treads, even while taking fire from Warpath, who's on the warpath. The more bots you add in, the better the display becomes. So while Megatron might not be in his truest form, he can still 100% fit into your collection even when in tank mode. Though I feel Tarn could have been bigger, as I said earlier, he's still a tank and a perfect loyal soldier to Megatron, and for that reason alone, he's a great option for any display as well. As is Bludgeon, which makes for a much more Cybertronian styled build, which looks quite good as well. And finally, my own battle unit with Megatron at the helm. Vortex, Overcharge, and the Elite Seeker, which serves as a nice military looking display. Once we get in the rest of the Combaticons, I suspect that this will be even more impressive. But for now, I love the look and colors of these guys together. Any ideas of some great builds I haven't thought of? Make sure to share and maybe I can incorporate into a future spotlight. One last one which I was pretty proud of, and it was a last minute afterthought. Switching out Megatron's fusion cannon in tank mode for Megatronus' Requiem blaster. And I couldn't believe it, but it actually worked. And you know what? It doesn't look half bad either. Actually, it fits in perfectly. It did take a bit of rearranging, specifically around the back multi-point joints, but ultimately I found the right configuration. My in-head canon would be that Megatron found the lifeless body of Megatronus and took the Requiem blaster for himself, becoming even more powerful and dangerous. And there's even a way for Megatron to keep his main cannon on by attaching it to the side for double the firepower, or switching it up and having the Requiem blaster attached to Megatron's side. And what's great about it, other than creating some new lore and display ideas, is that there are multiple ways to display this setup. It's really up to you. If you have a favorite from this selection or came up with your own, let me know. And since I only came up with this mashup idea during this part 2 of the spotlight, I figured I'd throw in a bonus shot of Studio Series 86 Megatron in bot mode, appropriating the Requiem blaster for himself. It's this last shot that just does it for me. What a way to end. Let's end with a quick look at the box art, starting with the front panel. Nice art, though not my favorite. I think the more comic looking ones from the Age of the Primes line is more my style, but this definitely conveys the stoic and determined Megatron. Same image of Megatron here on the side, just with a 180 flipped perspective. Makes you realize just how iconic Megatron is when looking at these images. Nothing too exciting on the back, but they did add a small description with a clip from the movie, which is cool. Overall, a bit underwhelming for the box art, but I didn't buy it for the box, so... Well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our Studio Series 86 Megatron review, which wraps up the entire Megatron spotlight. I'll link part 1 at the end of this video, as there is a ton more content there, and when taken together really gives a nice full overview of this incredible figure. Hope you enjoyed, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It only takes a second, and we'd love to have you join this growing community. See you all next time, and remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Bravo!